So right now my focus is going back to Ohio, promoting the book. I got a book, it's called Crisis of Command. It comes out 6 September. You can pre-order it on Amazon. It's really good. I end it with a punch card of 13 things that the military can do to get back on track. But ultimately I try and, it's like almost a two-part, but it transitions seamlessly. It's 17 years of how I grew disenfranchised with the policies of the Marine Corps, and then it goes into the micro story of once I posted that video, like the real raw thing that happened to me, which reinforces those trends. And then I end on, this is what we need to do to fix it. Accountability is good. Accountability signals, this is what's important. You, general, you failed a war. We, the American people, think winning wars is important. You didn't do that, you're fired. But it doesn't actually address why the general failed the war. Why he failed the war is a much deeper, complicated, systemic problem in terms of promotion, in terms of there's just not one reason. And so I try to lay that out in the book. But you know, like Don said earlier, we didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to get out of this overnight. But I feel like the problem often is people just admire the problem, and they think like, you're not gonna change it. And I can't tell you how many people, when I did what I did, actually put it in my book. One of my friends talking trash in my investigation, so I quoted him in my book. It's kind of like,
gotcha.
Yeah, you know, I tried not to be vindictive. I like really tried, but that one I had to do it. But he turned over his cell phone to the investigating officer to show the investigating officer that he was trying to figure out my motives. And in the text, I was like, it's about accountability. But I don't know why they included it in the investigation, because it actually like, it showed from like friend to friend that I was like, literally I was principled in like, this is about accountability. But the reason I'm telling you this is in that text he wrote, and so it's like in the investigation, I put it in the book, Stu, why are you doing this? There's just going to be one less lieutenant colonel. I don't really understand the point. And that sentiment is prevalent across almost every institution.
Not true.
I completely agree. As soon as we start thinking, you're not going to make a difference, then we've already lost. We've already fundamentally defeated ourselves. And you know, going around with these town halls, another thing that I figured out is the demographic of active people, whether it's school boards, whether it's town halls, whether it's events like this, is typically 50 to 60-year-olds. Where are the 30 and 40-year-olds?
Paying off the college loans.
So we got a couple. I'm not saying you're not here, but I guess I'd ask for the couple of hands that I saw up. Like, where's our whole group, right? Like, we're obviously outnumbered. And I'll tell you why I think it is. I think because in this new technological era, the way you do things is to manipulate ideas through technology. And what has happened in a cancel culture is the 30 and 40-year-olds are so worried about their job, their stability, and their family rightfully so, that they're scared to speak out. Like literally, fear has isolated them and frozen them in place. And so it requires a couple people with courage to step outside and be like, you guys all know this is wrong. Like every single person told me, hey, we agree with what you said, but the method in which you did it wasn't the right way. And I step back and, you know, I processed all these arguments, and I'm like, if you agree with what I said and you understand the military is destined to fail, then why would you be worried about the rules within the parameters of the failing system? Like, couldn't you apply critical thought, step outside of it? And the reason they don't is because it comes at a personal cost. And fear cripples them in place.
Wow, here's something, huh?
Sure.
So I look forward to seeing your book. You mentioned a little while ago that you had 13 suggestions in there for improving the military.
Yeah.
Is it coincidental that there were 13 service members lost in that suicide
I
bombing?
would be lying if I said that thought didn't cross my mind, but I didn't go into it thinking, I'm going to make 13. I actually had 11, and then like in the rewrites, I was like, I got 2 more. And then I was like, oh, it's 13, right? So no, I didn't like go into it with that. It just kind of worked out that way. But I did have that understanding.
I think it's cool, actually.
Yeah, it just worked out that way.
Okay.
So what options would Mackenzie have had getting that direct order from Commander-in-Chief? What could he have done?
Yep.
Or would it just have been likely that there would have been a workaround to get around him to do it? Like,
it's the $1 million question. And it's a great question. And I've had to like work through this question. The young Navy SEAL, the reason he knew me is he watched me on a Jocko podcast. I don't know if you guys know who Jocko is. He's a Navy SEAL, right? So that podcast had like 500,000 views, right? So like a 500,000 people out there saw that. And Jocko had a position of, you as the senior leader, if you don't go with the grain, then somebody else is just going to step up and do it, rather stay in place and try and manage it. And I disagree with him, right? We have a fundamental disagreement. But what I'll tell you is, to your question, which is a very good question. The question, if everyone didn't hear it, is General McKenzie was the guy that received the order from the president. And I do believe General McKenzie thought it was a bad order. Like, he's kind of hinted at that in his congressional testimony. But his quote was, I was following the orders I was given. There's a case study. General Singlab. He was the commander of Korea forces when Carter was president. Carter and Biden are like the same in a lot of ways, right? Carter told Singlab is a World War II veteran. We don't make generals like Singlab anymore. Carter told Singlab, I want you to pull all American forces out of Korea. Exact same situation. And Singlab went to Carter privately and said, if you pull all American forces out of Korea, everything we did in Korea will be lost. The North and South will go to war with each other, and we'll be right back where we started. And Carter said, I've heard you out. This is what we're doing. I don't want American forces overseas in a foreign country. Singlab said, I understand, sir. Singlab walked out the door and went public and said, what Carter is doing is going to send Korea back to where we started. All the sacrifices of the service members are going to be lost. Carter called Singlab and said, hey, what do you think you're doing? You're fired. He said, I already submitted my resignation.
Sure.
They don't teach that. They didn't teach that in his war college. They didn't teach that in my command and staff college. That's independent research that like you have to go and find, because they don't teach that stuff, because we have drifted so far that we don't allow different opinions and critical thought. But like that is the best example of a historical study of what happened.
Yep. Exactly.
Good question though.
Good job.
So to dovetail on to that, did you happen to hear when General Milley testified that he talked to his counterpart in China with the former president in charge at the time, saying that, hey, if anything should,
I'll give you a buzz.
get dicey towards you guys, I'll give you a heads up.
Milley has given the American people so many reasons to not trust, not like. I mean, he's overweight. I mean, I can just go on and on, right? The guy is not what we need. But it comes down to when you get up to that level, if the politicians want to keep you in place, that's what happens.
Yep.
And there's no mechanism to hold them accountable. So I'll give you an example, like the military left unchecked. The commander-in-chief. So when they were in the congressional testimony and all the congressmen were upset, congressmen and women, the answer Milley gave multiple times was, I serve at the pleasure of the president, right? The President of the United States, I challenge you, like going back on my independent research, when's the last time a president has fired a 4-star general for warfighting performance? They'll fire them for talking out, i.e. McChrystal, for any other, a million other things. But like you failed a war, they don't fire them. Why? Because it reflects on them as the commander-in-chief. So who else will hold a general accountable for failing a war? Well, Congress, I just explained to you, they're not using the DoD budget. They don't really have much other control. The military doesn't have a third arm that the United States government has, a judicial branch. They independently, judges within the military, within the UCMJ, can make recommendations, but ultimately the same general officer, people-pleasing commanders can say, nah, Judge, I don't agree with that. We're going to do it what I said. They investigate themselves and say, hey, we didn't do anything wrong. We're okay. And so they go completely unchecked. And, I went a little on a tangent there, but I go back to, obviously General Milley is off the reservation, but until the American people start demanding to their representatives that this is a problem, and we get people like Don Bolduc that know what they're doing, you got people up there that, so I watched an interview, Tom Cotton is probably one of the most well-known senators, right? He's a smart guy, he's a lawyer. He after he was a lawyer, he was an Army infantry officer, served in our wars, got out, became a senator. And I did a hit with Laura Ingraham, probably into May. And I was talking about essentially cowardice in our senior military leaders and how we need to hold them accountable. And it got like 900,000 views. Laura Ingraham then interviewed Tom Cotton a week later, the same conversation. And I know he saw it. I've talked to Tom a couple times, so I went and pitched some legislation to him. And he was also helping me a little bit in my ordeal. So like I have a personal relationship with Tom. I knew when I watched his interview that he was referencing some of the things that I had said, and his take was, hey, look, from now on, if they propose me a budget, just because it has DOD, I'm not going to approve it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit a questionnaire to general officers when they go to the 3 or 4 star level, and asking them questions like, do you believe in the Constitution? Do you believe in the Declaration of Independence? And so, okay, that's something, right? That's a start. But I still, to take a step back, like, hey, Tom, like, these guys are people pleasing and will lie through your teeth to do whatever they need to do for self-advancement. So that's not really going to work, Tom. Like, I appreciate you saying that, but that's not enough. And so I look at Tom, and I'm not trying to beat up Tom because he's like one of our better ones. But if like that's the best we got, and that's the best idea you have, like I need Don Bolduc to go up there and do something a little bit different. What other questions we got? Sir.
I studied history and was an undergraduate in college, and the biggest takeaway I have from that, I studied the Soviet Union and read China, but the biggest takeaway I had from my college career was the last speech that Dwight Eisenhower gave as President of the United States. And the one message in there that rings true today is beware of the military-industrial complex. A great war leader, a great tactician, and a guy who was the product of the military-industrial complex. And if you read any of his later readings, you know that he could not believe the depth and breadth and deep roots of the military-industrial complex, in the 50s and the 60s. And now I just believe it's words. And then I'd like to rip the screaming chicken off of Millie's shoulder because it's a screaming eagle. And so I just, you've dealt with that, and just I'm wondering about your comments on how we can address, especially in light of what you just said, the military-industrial complex. And now it's a biofarm complex, too.
Yeah. I'm going to buy you a drink later because you just set me up with a softball. I got so much to say on this.
I'll take your offer. I'll take your offer.
Yeah, done. Number one, I quoted that exact quote in one of my posts when I was violating the gag order. I put it in my book because it's so resounding and insightful. So a little history. The United States military is not in our foundational documents in the form that you know it. So our founding fathers envisioned the military as a domestic defense mechanism. What happened is, as we started to grow and develop, in World War I, we started getting involved there at the end, Bella Wood, some things. Woodrow Wilson outlined his 14-point speech, which really was the outline for America needs to be involved in the global stage as the leader. After Pearl Harbor, we had the National Security Act of 44, 47, 50 that created the national security establishment that we know. And then after Vietnam, it was the Goldwater-Nichols Act, last time we updated the legislation. And so what does that mean? A couple things on that. So number one, going back to Eisenhower. I'm going to make about Eisenhower. There was a guy named George Marshall going into World War II that cleaned, oh my man. I'm going to be drunk by the time I get on the stage.
All I got is water.
Thank you.
I can tell your mom you were hydrated.
Yeah.
Water or wine, huh?
Tuck your shirt.
I'm gonna get another note.
So Marshall got rid of clean house, and that's why Eisenhower ascended, right? And so look at where we're at now. Who are the famous generals of today? So I mean, I could beat up on them all day long. Number one, I just did an interview 2 days ago, and I was actually after the town hall with Don. I was supposed to do it in this office. They didn't have Wi-Fi, so then it dropped, and then I had to go to my car. So I'm doing the interview from my car like a bum. And they asked me about General Petraeus. So General Petraeus just made a comment about how we failed in Afghanistan. And my comment to the interviewer, not prepared for the question, was, "That's great. General Petraeus was literally the face of counterinsurgency. General Petraeus was then, because he was so special, moved to Afghanistan to fix Afghanistan. When General Petraeus says, holistically America failed, no, General Petraeus, I want to hear how you failed. Individually, I want to know the mistakes you made. You don't get the cop behind now the coalition when you were the face of it." General Mattis got out, went to General Dynamics. Then he went to Secretary of Defense. Then he went right back to General Dynamics. Secretary Austin got out, went to Raytheon, went into the Secretary of Defense. General Dunford Lockheed Martin. This is a serious problem. And I outlined, so in my 13 points, I'm just going to give it to you. That's one of them. General officers, when they're 4-stars and they get out and they go into this oligopoly of government contracting firms, we may not be able to stop them from taking one of those jobs, but they sure as shit shouldn't get a retirement.
No.
And they can choose because it's unethical. It's insider trading done legally. So, is the military-industrial complex a problem? Absolutely. I mean, General Mattis resigned over Trump wanting to pull out of Syria. ISIS materialized because of Mattis's failed policies. I could just keep going on and on, but the military-industrial complex is an absolute problem. Procurement, all of that. And Eisenhower, he called it. And the reason we even got Eisenhower was because we cleared house of all those old, archaic generals to allow Eisenhower to ascend. And you know what? There are other Eisenhowers. I could literally give you names of lieutenant colonels and colonels right now that should be the next Eisenhower. But those guys probably won't make it if we don't have someone else that gets up there and can clean house.
Say a few words about General Hayden?
Please.
Go ahead.
General Hayden?
Yes.
I don't know General Hayden.
He's the former NSA director, CIA,
CIA director,
former Air Force.
worked for Obama.
Yep.
If you're asking me to just comment on him, I can't. Do you have a specific question?
No, I mean, he's been very anti-Trump and anti-conservative.
Yeah.
And he's been probably involved in politicizing and talking in it.
So I'll take your question in a different direction. Intel community, whether you're talking FBI, NSA, police, military, all of them, I guess the intel community is a little bit different because they do bring in some outside people, but specifically FBI, you can see the obvious problems there. In the military, what a lot of people don't realize is you can't cross-pollinate. You can't bring in new ideas. So in the business world, if your culture is failing, you bring in a new CEO. You literally can't do that in these big government organizations because you home grow them. And then the people at the top, once they start to centralize the power, they control who gets up there. They control the beliefs of that system.
And it's a Title 10, Title 50 dilemma between the IC and the DOD.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
It's a problem.
But I mean, a million problems. I guess I'll go back to you can get lost in admiring it, but I think one bite at a time. People starting to understand. People getting active. I think there's ways to it. I think that intel community has grown into its own beast. I'll give you another story. I got back from Afghanistan, a year combat, every day combat, and I went to a school after it, and it was hard for me at the school because just the emotional drop was tough. And one of my infantry officer instructors came up, and he was a CIA ground branch. So you had to understand, I had a personal relationship with him, and he was talking about Afghanistan. Obviously, I just come from it. He was in eastern Afghanistan. That's where I was in the mountains of Pakistan. And he was trying to say CIA ground branch kills people. Marines shouldn't kill people. Marines should build the intelligence, and then they pass it off to CIA ground branch. That was frustrating to me. He was so I got up and I asked him a question. I still remember the question. And I was like, hey, I have a question. Alan, remember me? Was your lieutenant? Okay, here it is. Mullah Sangin, he's the leader of the Haqqani network that bounces between Pakistan and Afghanistan. If we were to find Mullah Sangin right now, would we try to bring him onto our team or would we kill him? And he goes, man, that's a really good question. I don't know. And I was like, if you don't know the answer to that, you're the CIA ground branch. What is the intel community doing? We're all running around like crazy people, and you're telling me I can't kill people because you want to kill people, but you're literally our intel community, and I asked you literally a question that somebody should be answering, and you don't know the answer to it. Oh. Little wild berry.
So how did that end? Thank you.
Amazon, September 6th.
Yeah, Crisis of Command is the book. You can go on Amazon and pre-order it,
Already did.
or you can wait. Thanks, Stu. And you can buy it on Audible, and you can continue to listen to his voice as he narrates his book in the very special way that he does narration.
Croc TV.